You're 10 years old, a car pulls up outside, you don't know the make, you don't know the model, but something in your chest shifts before your brain can even explain it. The sound, the shape, the way it sits, low and wide, like it means business. Without even thinking, you press your face against the glass. You don't know why, you just know you have to look. Fast forward 20 years. You're standing in a garage that costs more per month than your first apartment. You're explaining to someone, maybe your partner, maybe a friend, why you need the upgraded suspension. They're nodding, but they're not convinced. And somewhere underneath all those explanations, a part of you already knows this isn't really about the suspension. It never was. Here's the thing. Men don't just like cars. They fall into them. They build identities around them. They spend money they probably shouldn't, time they don't have, and emotional energy that makes absolutely no rational sense, all pointed at a machine. So why? Why does a car become so much more than transportation? Psychology actually has a very specific answer. Not the car magazine version, not the tired explanation that boys just like mechanical things. The real answer, because it turns out cars aren't just a hobby, they're a psychological Swiss Army knife. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why your brain was always going to end up here. In 1985, two psychologists at the University of Rochester, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, published what would become one of the most influential frameworks in behavioral psychology. They called it self-determination theory. And the core idea is surprisingly simple. Human beings don't just chase pleasure, they crave three fundamental psychological needs. And when those needs aren't met, something inside us starts to fade. The first is autonomy, the feeling that you are in control of your own life. The second is competence, the feeling that you're genuinely good at something that matters. And the third, relatedness, the feeling that you belong to somewhere, to someone, to something. These aren't just nice things to have. According to Deci and Ryan, they're basic psychological needs, almost as fundamental as food and sleep. When they're satisfied, people thrive. When they're not, people start searching for something that can fill the gap. And that's where the car enters the picture. Because cars, almost uniquely, don't just satisfy one of these needs. They satisfy all three at the same time. And then they add something else, something Deci and Ryan's original framework didn't fully account for, something that's especially powerful for men. Status. We'll come back to that, but first let's look at these needs one by one, because once you see exactly how cars satisfy each of them, you'll realize something important. This isn't just a hobby you choose, it's something your brain was always going to seek. Of the three needs in self-determination theory, autonomy is probably the most misunderstood. People hear the word autonomy and they think freedom. They're not wrong, but psychologically, it's much more specific than that. Autonomy is the feeling that you are making the decisions. Not society, not your boss, not your circumstances, you. Now here's where things get interesting, especially for men in 2026. Research consistently shows that men experience significantly higher levels of what sociologists call role constraint. The feeling that your options in life are much narrower than you'd like. The expectation to provide. The expectation to stay competent without complaining. The unwritten script that leaves very little room for uncertainty. A 2021 meta-analysis published in the Psychology of Men and Masculinity journal found something fascinating. Men who reported higher levels of role constraint also reported stronger compensatory behaviors. In other words, they were more likely to seek activities. That gave them a sense of control. Their daily lives couldn't. And suddenly, the open road isn't just a metaphor, it's compensation. Because when you're driving, when you're really driving, there are no emails, no performance reviews, no notifications, no one waiting for you to fail. There's just the machine responding to your inputs in real time, doing exactly what you tell it to do. That feeling of command, psychologically, it registers as freedom. And for men who spend most of their lives navigating systems that don't really care about their autonomy, the car becomes the one place where something powerful obeys. Remember that word? Obeys. We're coming back to it. Here's something most people don't understand about competence. It's not enough to be good at something easy. Your brain's reward system doesn't hand out dopamine for mastering something trivial. It rewards you in proportion to how difficult the challenge feels. If the challenge isn't real, the satisfaction never really lands. That's why getting better at a mobile game feels exciting at first, but after a while, it feels empty. Now compare that to learning how to heel-toe downshift. perfectly into a corner. Even if nobody ever sees you do it, it still feels deeply rewarding. Why? Because your brain knows you earned it. In 2018, researchers studying skilled motor activity found something fascinating: tasks that require coordinated, high-precision physical control, the kind that takes months to master, activate the brain's reward circuitry far more strongly than tasks that rely on thinking alone. In other words, when your body masters something difficult, it hits different. And a car, especially a powerful one, is arguably the most demanding physical machine most people will ever learn to control at a high level. You're managing speed, weight transfer, steering input, throttle position, braking force, spatial awareness, all at the same time. And in a performance setting, the margin for error is real. The feedback is immediate. And when you get it wrong, you feel it. That's not just driving. That's a mastery challenge, a genuinely difficult one. And when enthusiasts talk about loving the feel of a car, the communication through the steering wheel, the way the weight shifts through a corner, what they're really describing is an incredibly precise feedback system. One that tells them in real time exactly how well they're performing. The car is grading you every single second. And research shows that men, more than women, are generally more drawn to activities with clear, objective performance feedback, less ambiguity, more scoreboard. And that's exactly what the car becomes, the scoreboard. So far, everything we've talked about, autonomy, competence, those feel respectable. I drive because it gives me freedom. It challenges me. Those are the kinds of answers you can comfortably say at a dinner party. But underneath those reasons, there are two more layers, and they're the ones almost nobody says out loud. The first is status. We've talked about status signaling before on this channel, but the role cars play in male status hierarchies deserves a much closer look. Evolutionary psychologists have argued for decades that men's drive for status isn't just vanity, it's signaling. Historically, displaying visible resources signaled reproductive fitness, the ability to provide, and social dominance. The peacock has its tail, the stag has its antlers. The modern man, he has the twin turbocharged exhaust note. A 2016 study from researchers at Cardiff University found something interesting. Men, far more than women, viewed ownership of a high-performance car as a direct signal of social rank. And just as importantly, other men quietly adjusted their perception of someone's status based on what he drove, often without even realizing they were doing it. So the car isn't just something you experience, it's something other men read. But there's another layer, and this one surprises a lot of people. Belonging. Car culture is one of the strongest tribal systems in modern life. Car meets, online forums, track days, that subtle nod when another driver passes by in the exact same model. The group chat that somehow lasts longer than most friendships. But what holds those communities together isn't just a shared interest, it's a shared identity. When you modify your car the same way someone on the other side of the world does, the same wheels, the same suspension, the same setup, you're speaking the same language, a language most people around you don't understand. And belonging to a group that outsiders can't fully access is one of the oldest and most powerful psychological bonding mechanisms we have. So here's the question I want you to hold on to. If cars were only about transportation, why does selling one feel like loss? Not inconvenience, not annoyance. Loss will get there. Here's the uncomfortable question. If all of this is true, autonomy, competence, status, belonging, then why don't other hobbies create the same level of identity? Think about it. Gaming gives you competence, community, even status within its own world. Fitness, that gives you competence, status, community too. And yet, neither of them shapes a man's identity quite like cars do. Why? There are 3 reasons, and they all work together. First, physical scale. A car is big, it occupies real space, you can smell it, hear it, feel it through your entire body when you accelerate. That physical experience activates your nervous system in a way a screen simply can't. Your brain processes physical mastery very differently from virtual mastery, it always has. Second, social visibility. Post a photo of your car, strangers engage, drive something distinctive. People walk over just to talk to you. Pull into a car meet, and instantly, people know something about you, your taste, your investment, your commitment. Cars aren't just possessions, they're social performances. In the most literal sense, you are seen. Most hobbies don't work like that. Your CrossFit numbers don't follow you into a restaurant. Your car does. And then there's the third reason, the one that makes this especially true for men. Cars let men feel without having to explain. That's difficult to put into words, but it's real. For decades, psychologists have found that, on average, men struggle more than women to access and verbalize their emotional states. Not because the emotions aren't there, they are, but because the conditioning to suppress them starts early and runs deep. A car becomes an emotional outlet. That never asks you to explain what you're feeling. You don't sit behind the wheel and think, I feel overlooked, I feel inadequate, I need to feel powerful. You don't say any of that. You just drive, and somewhere between the speed, the sound, the control, and the solitude, the emotional need gets met without ever forcing you. To make yourself vulnerable enough to name it, the car does the emotional work silently. And that's why no other hobby does all of this at the same time. Earlier, I asked you to remember two things: the word obeys and why selling a car feels like loss. Here's the answer to both. The car obeys because most of the things that matter to men don't. Your job doesn't always reward effort. A relationship depends on two people, and the world, most of the time, it doesn't care what you want. But the car is different. Give it the right input, and it gives you the right output. Again and again and again. It's a closed system, one you can actually master. And in a world that often feels like there is no clear scoreboard, the car becomes the clearest feedback loop a man can find. Now, why does selling one feel like loss? Because you're not selling a machine. You're letting go of a version of yourself, the version who finally could afford it, the version who spent weekends building it, the version who drove alone, late at night, windows down, when something heavy was sitting on his chest. Cars don't just carry people, they carry entire chapters of who we were, the versions of ourselves we needed to become at different moments in our lives. And that's the real reason the obsession runs so deep. It's not the horsepower, it's not even the badge. It's that, for a lot of men, the car is one of the only places in life where four things become true at the exact same time. They are free, they are capable, they are seen, they belong. Think about that for a second. When something gives you freedom, mastery, recognition, and belonging all at once, you don't just like it, you need it. The obsession was never really about the car. It was about what the car was giving you that almost nothing else in modern life could give you, all at the same time. Self-determination. Theory gives you freedom and competence. Evolutionary psychology gives you status. Tribal identity gives you belonging. Now put all of that into a machine that weighs 2 tons, sounds like a war, and responds to your every input. What you get is one of the most complete psychological delivery systems ever built, on 4 wheels. That's the real reason, not because men are simple, quite the opposite. Men are complicated, and somehow quietly. A car is one of the very few things that carries all of it. So let me ask you something. Was there ever a car that meant more to you than it probably should have? Maybe it was your first car. Maybe it was the one you still regret selling. Or maybe it's the one you still think about years later. If there is, tell me about it in the comments. I want to know what it was. And even more importantly, I want to know what was happening in your life when you owned it. Because chances are, it was never just about the car. And if this kind of conversation is exactly what you've been looking for, the psychology behind car culture, not just horsepower, not just specs, then subscribe, because that's exactly what we do here.